Hello, friends. Patrick McFarland here, coming at you with another episode of the Liberty Weekly podcast. This episode is episode 70, and we have a few guests on today. That is Antony Sammeroff and Tom Laird from the Scottish Liberty podcast. And I'm so excited to welcome you guys on. How's it going today?
It's going good, man. It's good. The weather's good. Feeling groovy.
Yeah, the weather is good. I have barely slept for some unknown reason, but I'm on top form on adrenaline to be on the Liberty Weekly podcast. I'm glad that your show exists, and it's great how you signpost people to what's going on in Liberty each week.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. And yeah, I heard you guys maybe like a year and a half ago from the Tom Woods show. So I mean, your appearances really make waves, you know.
What have you found out about us from the Tom Woods show? We haven't had anyone come in from Tom Woods show before.
Yeah, right.
We would have like no career if it wasn't for Tom Woods. Seriously, yeah. A good 3/4.
Big shout out to Uncle Tom.
Uncle Tom, yeah. A good 3/4 of our listenership, or maybe more, discovered us through Tom Woods. So we owe him a lot.
Hell yeah. And I mean, so my favorite thing, and I've said in the show, is meeting Liberty folks from across the world. And I have a special place in my heart for Scotland because my mom's side of the family is Scottish. And yeah, so I was one of the big reasons why I wanted to get you on is because I had an American legal history class in school, and we spent most of it studying British law and British history. And
Okay.
But I'm sure we'll get into that. But first, I just wanted to ask you guys, like, you just want to tell your Liberty stories and how you decided to start the show?
Okay, you go first.
Well, I hatched out of an egg as a libertarian.
Yeah.
Basically, I was, I guess I would say, in modern terms, you would have said I was a progressive growing up, although we don't use that word in the UK, and certainly didn't in the 2000s. So, but I wasn't like a full-blown commie or anything like that. I believed in a market economy, but I believed in a heavily regulated market economy with, workers' rights and safety nets and all that stuff. But I wouldn't say that I had a very cardboard view of the world, because I definitely saw, say, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party as two heads of the same dragon, even though under the Bush era I thought the Republicans were slightly worse. I was believed in that time that there was a movement towards some kind of awakening, like some global awakening, because of the anti-war protests and the stuff about the Patriot Act that was going on in the internet at that time. Of course, when Obama came to power, I discovered that was really more about being anti-right than anti-war in any consistent way. So I guess disillusioned by that and the appearance of Ron Paul on the scene, I've been making some political videos on YouTube from a sort of left of centre angle, and a bunch of libertarians gatecrashed my YouTube channel and started arguing with me. And over the course of 2 or 3 years, I went down the rabbit hole of libertarian YouTube videos and gradually migrated. So I didn't have a conversion experience. I just ran out of excuses not to become a full-blown libertarian.
Yeah, it just goes to show that what we do on the internet actually does change some things.
Well, yeah, if people are looking for good information, I think sometimes with our shows, not always, but sometimes what I would like to do is provide a resource that if someone gets in an argument with their lefty friend, they can say, watch this podcast, and maybe it'll come in useful sometime.
Yeah.
I don't know. Other ones are just very entertaining for us.
Yeah.
Well,
Shall I go?
I'm always a big believer that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But so you have to have the horse be willing to drink. So that's what my show is, I guess, too. Yeah, but what about you, Tom? Yeah,
I'm always willing to drink.
Yeah.
I can attest to that.
Yeah. I guess I came quite late to the Libertarian Party, so to speak. In my youth, my motivations politically were staunch anti-communism and a belief in Scottish independence. That was the two main focuses of my political agitation. And that hatred of communism kind of drove me into the extreme right. So I was involved in the extreme right for a while. I was actually a member of the Scottish National Party at one time because I believed in independence. But that party took a massive swing to the left somewhere around the 80s, early 80s. And I thought, okay, this party's not for me. But I was basically after I ditched the kind of the extreme right wing stuff. I was politically bereft for years, pretty much politically agnostic. The only thing I knew is it doesn't matter who you vote for, you end up with a government, and 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, it won't be a government that I like. So I didn't even know what a libertarian was. I kind of came to it by accident. I got into a band in the 90s called Stuck Mojo, and they'd done an album, and in the first segment of the album, there was a shot of a talk show host called Neil Burtz, and he was really giving Bill Clinton a lambast, and I thought, I like that. So I checked out his website, and he had like a little matrix, little question and answer thing on his website. And according to how you answered the questions, it told you where you were in this little political diamond-shaped matrix. And I kept coming up right libertarian. And I thought, that can't be right. Libertarian sounds a bit too much like liberal to me. Like every time I kept trying, it still came up right libertarian. So that kind of got me thinking. And at that time, the internet there wasn't too much. It wasn't as prolific as it is now in terms of libertarian web pages and libertarian podcasts. But I kind of stumbled through it, got some information, and kind of regarded myself eventually as a classic liberal. And probably I've been calling myself a libertarian for about the last 8 years or so. Stumbled across the Libertarians in Scotland. There was about 4 of us used to meet in a pub of a Sunday. Once a month. In fact, it wasn't even once a month. When I looked on the Libertarian website in Scotland, there'd been one meeting, and that was the only one that was on there. And that had been when I checked it out, that was a year previously. Then I turned up to the one meeting that they did have eventually, and then it became we kept it going. It became a regular thing. Before we knew it, we actually formed the party. And now here we are with a fully fledged Scottish Libertarian Party, of which I'm privileged to be the leader. So, yeah. And then met with Mr. Sammeroff here, and we decided it'd be a good idea to do our own podcast.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
What were you going to say? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
I was just going to say, and the rest is just history.
Yeah, right? Well, I mean, that's awesome. I mean, that's like exponential growth. Like what they say, Murray Rothbard in the 70s, there were 24 libertarians in the entire world. Yeah. So, yeah, there's
a conservative estimate, I think.
Yeah. Well,
forgive the bad pun.
We kind of touched on this, and this was on the agenda, but can you tell me a little bit about like the climate for liberty in the UK? I'm sure you get this question a lot. And then do you want to talk a little bit about how like the UK obviously is a bunch of different kingdoms. How do Scots see themselves in relation to the English? And I know, do Welsh people consider themselves English? And how does that all fit together? Yeah.
Do you want to go for that? Well, I'll give it a shot.
I'll go for the climate for liberty. It sucks pretty bad. Scotland is very left, especially economically, and always has been. But in the past, at least, was not very authoritarian in terms of foreign policy or civil liberties. It was a bit more civil libertarian than England, I'd say, a bit less conservative on those issues. Now we've got all sorts of crackdowns on free speech. Recently, the government mandated that terms like British values can't be used in schools. What else? I mean, they put plain packaging on cigarettes and hide them away so you can't even see what cigarettes are on offer in a shop. If you ask what's the cheapest, they say, I can't tell you what the cheapest pack is, you need to look at the price list by law. There's You can't buy alcohol on a Sunday. You can't drink. You can't buy alcohol after 10 p.m. at night from a shop,
or before 12 noon.
or before 12 noon.
They've just put a tax on sodas.
Sodas.
Sugar, anything with sugar in it. Yeah, they've just put a tax on that as well.
All the clubs need to close at 3 a.m. except casinos, which are allowed to sell alcohol until 5 a.m. for some reason. Well, that's a great idea. If you want another drink, the only place you can go is the casino. I don't know where the laws come from, but we can imagine there's some crony capitalism involved. In so many ways, the climate for liberty is poor. That's not to mention that, as you know, famous YouTuber Count Dankula was just sentenced for teaching.
He's not been sentenced yet. He's been found guilty.
He's been found guilty of hate crime for teaching his girlfriend's hug to do a Nazi salute in response to the declarations Die Heiler Gas the Jews, which, admittedly is pretty unsavory. It's an untasteful joke, but is really the best use of public funds, locking people up for this kind of stuff. We have free university education, and a lot of the universities are teaching bogus degrees that don't have any vocational output. All of the women's studies and feminist propaganda is being taught through them out of the public purse. So people are being indoctrinated into this stuff. So I would say the climate for liberty is poor. Anything you should add?
Well, you asked about the different aspects of the United Kingdom, Wales, and so forth. I guess Wales being a principality, they were kind of completely conquered by England, way back when. Scotland has never been completely conquered by England. We were worse. We sold out. We sold our liberty to the English, and became part of the United Kingdom in the 1700s. But Ireland, obviously, were always fiercely independent and see themselves as Irish, not British. I would say most Welsh would probably see themselves as British, but Welsh, I think North Wales are more fiercely Welsh. The Welsh language is more prevalent there than it is in the rest of Wales. But having said that, Wales has a nationalistic type party in power in their assembly. They don't have a parliament, they have an assembly, but amounts to the same thing. It doesn't have the far-reaching powers that the Scottish Parliament does, but they have it. Northern Ireland has its own assembly. So there is sort of a devolvement of power there that has been agitated for throughout the years. And Scotland is becoming, it's moving more towards the idea of breaking away from the UK. But what's being proposed is not independence. It's far from independence. They're talking about leaving the UK but becoming part of the European Union, which is insanity. This is not independence in anybody's book. Well, apart from in the idiotic minds of the Scottish National Party. So it's a cocktail of dunces.
Yeah, right. And so I wanted to touch more on the Dankula issue, but the reason why I ask is because I was doing some studying of, the Magna Carta and Bruce L. Benson's book, The Enterprise of Law. It's a terrific, unknown libertarian gem about how courts would work, but he spends a lot of it talking about the Anglo-Saxon legal tradition. And what I'm really, I guess what needs to be grieved is the loss of traditional British liberty in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, and seeing police officers spending all their time in Britain collecting garden tools and, kitchen knives and stuff. And while there's real crime, as you guys mentioned in London, the murder rate is higher than New York City. So what do you guys think about that?
Well, first, in fairness, the murder rate in New York City's come down dramatically.
Has it? Okay.
So it's not so much that the murder rate in London has gone up, but the murder rate in New York has come down. But it's still, I think, from the beginning of this year, there's been 30 or so, around about that.
Stabbings.
Yeah, it's usually knives, but there have been shootings as well. So when the police have time and resources to spend patrolling Twitter and Facebook, looking for people saying unsavory things or online bullying, which I don't know what that is. I don't know how you can bully somebody online. Maybe somebody will enlighten me. But while they're doing that, there is actual physical violence and physical crimes going on, for which people are only lightly punished, if at all. So while people who are committing violent offences can walk away with a community sentence, community service, someone like Dankula, who posts, which some people may find an unsavoury video on YouTube, is staring down the barrel of maybe a 3-year sentence, which is insanity.
Expense. I think it's about £40,000 a year to lock someone up in the UK. Yeah. So, I mean,
and just the expense of the trial.
Just buy someone an apartment.
Yeah, just the expense of the trial. 2 years it took to reach this verdict. 2 years, which is longer than Nuremberg, the Nuremberg trials. And that's a judge, a prosecutor, lawyers.
It's just a cash cow.
Yeah.
So, the public purse.
But he's being sentenced this Monday coming.
It's that soon. Sorry.
Yeah. So we'll be the Scottish Libertarian Party will be there, hopefully in force, to make our protest and make our feelings known about. It's ludicrous that he was even ever arrested. And there's the social fallout. I mean, he lost his job through this as well. Found it difficult to get another one. Some people would say, well, it's his own fault for posting the video. But, it was just a video. And what amounts to an online joke, whether you find it funny or not.
He wasn't even intending for the video to go viral or something like that. He just woke up to it going viral. He just put it up for a laugh for a couple of his friends to see. Goes away on holiday. Next thing he knows, the video is gone exploded.
Yeah.
Well, what is public opinion about this? Just the pulse of what people are saying.
There are very few. I still talk to people regularly who have no idea that this is going on. It's it's pretty much been shunned by the mainstream press. Anybody who's internet savvy knows all about this, and anybody who's on the manosphere or anybody who's in libertarian circles kind of knows about this stuff. But anybody who just relies on the mainstream media for their daily dose of bullshit, they don't know anything about it,
Yeah.
And they'll still act with incredulity. First of all, they'll say things, well, that didn't happen in Scotland. You say, well, yes, it did. Then they'll say, well, he didn't actually get arrested. And say, yes, he did. Oh, but he didn't actually get charged. Yes, he did. Oh, he didn't actually go to court. Yes, it did. And all through, they deny, there's absolute denial that this is going on. But it is going on. It's a fact. Anybody can just do a 5-minute Google search and find out the basic facts on it. But by and large, the larger segment of the population really don't know that this is going on.
I don't know if that's better or worse, because they seem to be incredulous that this is actually happening. But at the same time, if you don't know about it, you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, sure. But it's just people's laziness. They can find out. I mean, I speak to people all the time who continually ask me the same, like when they know you're a libertarian, you get the usual questions, who's going to build the roads and all this kind of stuff. And the same people are consistently too lazy to go on Google and just do some research.
The main one is, who will protect against monopolies? It's like, why don't you type in libertarian monopolies? And the other one, well, markets don't care about externalities. Even Noam Chomsky, some people believe the greatest living mind, he goes, well, markets don't care about externalities. It's like, dude, you're like 88. Can you YouTube libertarian externalities and listen to some of the responses to that? Why haven't you done your research?
Yeah.
So frustrating.
I mean, these are questions that's been answered over and over again by our types.
Ad nauseum.
Yeah. We've got a couple of good ones with Scotty M. Do you remember what the first one's called?
I don't.
That's one of my favourite episodes of our show. Anyway, we've got a couple of shows with a guy called Scotty M. The second one is called The Myth of Free Market Monopolies. The first one is something about like what people don't know about capitalism or something like that. Those are two good episodes for our podcast where we debunk some of those myths.
Good plug there.
Yeah, awesome. I'll put those in the show notes page. I think this,
Okay, thanks.
yeah, this should be coming out on tomorrow on Friday. So we'll
All
do
right,
that
cool.
for you. So one thing I am curious about is what you guys learn about the Magna Carta, and B, just about your Constitution in general, because, you know, Americans, we have a really hard time wrapping our head around the concept of an unwritten Constitution.
Yeah.
So do you guys want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, when I went to school, which wasn't exactly last week, my history classes at school were pretty boring. They didn't give us much on Scottish history. The only thing they gave us from British history was the Industrial Revolution, which of course was a completely slanted, you know, here, take these big spoonfuls of socialist theory, you know, and Charles Dickens, you know, they talk as if Charles Dickens actually wrote reportage when he wrote his novels instead of just poverty porn for posh people. So it was like, yeah. So the Magna Carta, I don't even think we touched on it. It was mentioned, but we never done much study. We've probably done more of a study on the American Constitution than we've done on the British Constitution. But you're right, we don't actually have a written Constitution. It's a mixture of different documents. It's a mixture of common law, something called the Petition of Right that came in 1628, which specifies certain individual liberties that the Crown can't infringe upon. Then in 1688, there was something called the Glorious Revolution, where William of Orange came over from Holland. The Dutch call it an invasion, but we don't call it an invasion. We say he was invited over, which he was. But anyway, when he established his government, they had something called the Bill of Rights, or the Declaration of Rights, which he signed to, which is basically about the sovereignty of Parliament. So Parliament is pretty much sovereign, and the Constitution is basically whatever the Parliament says it is. You know, and any statute or act that they enact or enable will become part of the Constitution. There's the rule of law. That's part of the constitutional thing. I mean, rule of law goes all the way back to Aristotle, obviously. But in Britain, there was a Scottish theologian called Samuel Rutherford, and he came up with this concept of rule of law in a way of rebutting the divine right of kings to rule. So that, in other words, law should be the ultimate ruler of a nation, and nobody should be above the law, including the sovereign. In Scotland, we have something called the Claim of Right. That was established in 1689. So that's basically the basis of Scottish constitutional law. There are royal prerogatives, i.e. the Crown still has certain things that it can enable or enact. So they have certain powers, but mostly Parliament is sovereign. So it's a bit of a mess. You've got Magna Carta, as you say. That was the barons when they fought against King John. The whole idea there was for the barons to keep their own money. I mean, at that time, the king could tax them for foreign wars and force them to fight in foreign wars that were really only the king's business, i.e. the king would have certain claims to certain dukedoms or certain crowns in probably France, and he would then force the barons and the barons' subjects to take part in that war for the benefit of that king. So the barons fought the crown, forced John to sign the Magna Carta, which was basically to say that the king could not force the barons to get involved in wars on his behalf. And in Magna Carta, there are the beginnings of certain individual rights and liberties for free men at the time, at least. And as you'll know, the Magna Carta was probably one of the documents that the founding fathers of the American Constitution used for their document. So yeah, it's a bit of a mess. And in modern times, we've also got the Human Rights Act of 1998, which incorporates some of European constitutional law into that. David Cameron, the previous Prime Minister to Theresa May. He made a lot of talk about having a British Bill of Rights to replace the Human Rights Act. But it never ever materialised, and I haven't heard anybody speaking about it for some time. So yeah, the British Constitution, there is one, but you're right, it's not written down, and it's a mishmash of different documents. So yeah.
Yeah, and given that the Parliament can declare anything they want to be part of the Constitution, it kind of subverts the point of the Constitution, which is to tell the Parliament what it can and cannot do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that people these days, well, not libertarians so much.
Literally buzzed by a fly. Yeah.
The Constitution is just a piece of paper, and it cannot hold back the tide of government. However, I think these days people don't appreciate, a lot of Americans don't appreciate what it means to actually have a document that says, this is what the government can do, this is what the government can't do. And when people go, oh, the Constitution, that's so old-fashioned, blah, 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 they don't really actually realise they're fighting against themselves.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's so important about the Constitution is this idea that you have the right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, or property, whichever way you want to read it. Like, because this is a historic document for reasons that people don't appreciate, which is it's the first political document that sanctions the rights of the individual. Your pursuit of happiness, right? Your right to life and liberty, that's an individualist thing. Before that, in history, no such thing. I mean, what are you talking about? Separation of church and state? Are you crazy? If you let people speak blasphemy, then people will go to hell as a consequence of that. The idea that the individual should come first is not something often seen in history, and it was a conclusion that took hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years to arrive at, thousands of years, and people don't actually realise that.
I mean, I think the beauty of your Constitution for me is it's so simple and concise. It's such a small document. You know, the Bill of Rights itself, just a tiny book. And you look at something like European constitutional law, it's volumes and volumes and volumes, and it takes teams of lawyers to actually work it out. You know, a simple, ordinary man can't actually work it out. Even if you look at the voluminous stuff that you have in British constitutional law, it's massive amounts. So it's just the American Constitution to me is a thing of beauty. You know, even that when it says, you know, Congress shall make no law. You know, it's the very fact that it can say something like that. You shall make no law concerning the establishment of a religion. That's a beautiful thing, and I think Americans should cherish it. Well, it saddens me when I hear people attack it. It saddens me when I hear people describe it as some sort of living, breathing document that you can just add to or subtract to whenever you want. As Antony said, that completely defeats the purpose of having a constitution in the first place.
Yeah, and excuse me, that was a brilliant recounting. I'm really glad that we could go through that history of the British Constitution. And I mean, being anarchists ourselves, you know, I've done a lot of work on the Constitution of No Authority and how, you know, the document is flawed because we're always just standing there holding the bag, scratching our heads, wondering what went wrong with our minarchy, you know, but it's easy to throw out the brilliance of the Constitution and the fact that it is important and it is the, you know, the pinnacle of hundreds of years of struggling for liberty. And, it's funny to kind of look at it and see what the problems are with both the British side and on the US side. But one thing that I really did appreciate, and this is my textbook. I don't know if you guys know Anne Leon. Is she a known scholar or a known name?
I can't.
Yeah, it's the first time I've heard.
It's the first time I've heard.
I didn't know if she was a prominent scholar but
she maybe is. Don't take her ignorance of her as
no.
Yeah. I mean, she may be, but
people still read books.
Yeah, right. Well, one thing I found very interesting in my class, because I wrote a big long paper about nullification in the United States, and then in doing so, I learned that one thing that the founding fathers were doing, like Thomas Jefferson in particular, he was writing to King George, asking him to assert his power as the monarch to help the Americans, because the Americans were hearkening back to the liberties that they saw that they had as Englishmen. And so just I want people to realize that, you know, a lot of what we hearken to is from, you know, the British tradition and the Anglo-Saxon tradition. So it's interesting.
It's interesting what you say, but I mean, Lysander Spooner, as you know, he didn't have a lot of good things to say about the Constitution. I think while you have a government, your best defense against it is the Constitution.
Definitely.
While you have one, we all agree that it's probably best if the government goes. You know, government is a cancer, but while it exists, you better have that document, because once it goes, you have no lawful defense against the government and its predations.
Hell yeah, it is important. Yeah, and I, you know, trying to, like, Ron Paul always appeals to the Constitution, and I think that Ron Paul is a Rothbardian through and through, but his persona, his measuring power, you know, is just that appealing to conservative Republicans who like the Constitution. But
I mean, I think it's important to mention as well that, I mean, I'm sure you'll agree, the Constitution didn't actually give people any rights.
Yeah.
It only highlighted that these are the rights that you already have and should never be taken away from you. You know, that's the interesting thing.
And people don't get that. I mean, and we were talking, I think I've thrown this out, I guess, a couple times in the show, is that I got a 5 on the AP US history exam. So high school students have a chance to take like college courses when they're in high school. And I got the highest score on the AP history test. Well, going through and learning the libertarian things, I didn't know anything. I mean, I knew their version of history, you know what I mean? But even about the wars and stuff. So it's just, what is the state in the UK? Is it very similar to the United States, where people just don't know their history?
I would say pretty much, you know. I would say your average citizen is fairly ignorant, you know, of their own history and why it matters. And as I say, in school, if I relied on what I was taught in school for my history, I wouldn't know anything. Man. You know, they really didn't teach us anything that was controversial. It was all pretty much stuff that was. I mean, we got some agrarian stuff, like I say, the Industrial Revolution. We learned about some ancient dude that they found in a peat bog in Anglia or something like that. You know, we spent days, weeks, you know, learning about this guy. Now, the whole thing was supposed to teach you how to dissect history and how to approach it, but it was pretty useless, I thought. You know, and I love history and I loved history, but it's like everything I learned in school, it almost put me off. You know, I got Shakespeare at school and it almost killed Shakespeare for me. It was years later that I revisited and found I loved it, but the school almost killed it for me. And it was the same, sadly, with history. So unfortunately, we don't. People are not super aware of what their history is and why it matters.
Yeah. Most people don't remember anything we learned in school anyway. I mean, we did First and Second World War, pretty standard stuff. I don't think we got that broad history.
Yeah, personally. And it's pretty much the Marie Antoinette thing. You know, not let them eat cake, but let them eat soccer. Let them eat what do you call that shit TV show or the talent show? All these endless talent shows and X Factor. Yeah, there you go. Lap that up. Take big spoonfuls of that shit. You know, that matters more. Yeah, bread and circuses, man. That stuff matters more to your average punter than history and why it's important.
Yeah, and even through it, and I was going to mention Anne Leon because I did an episode on the Magna Carta, and throughout I just found she was constantly belittling the significance of the Magna Carta and saying, King John repudiated it right away, and it didn't prevent the Civil War that it was meant to prevent, and and it was only for the barons. It didn't protect any of the freemen or any of the peasants who were under their thumb. So it is learning about history, and Lysander Spooner would say that essentially what the Magna Carta did was take away the executive power of King John to carry out the laws. And it's not that he could legislate all he wanted, but when it came to the executive power, that was lacking. So yeah, it was just super interesting. And
Magna Carta is the beginning of the end of absolute monarchy.
Yeah.
Which is important.
And I think the interesting part about it too is that I found even with the Magna Carta, they were still hearkening back to the freedoms that they had in the Anglo-Saxon times. And it's crazy that a lot of people say that libertarians are forward looking, like Mance Raider, he's made this point, but I would point to that and say, all these documents are hearkening back to, 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
But, so I did have a specific question for Antony about one of my listeners. Did you got that part?
Yeah. Why didn't you read it out?
Sure. So here's a question from Matt in my MeWe group through the group chat. He says, great podcast I heard about from Tom Woods. I would ask if Antony has made any progress on the environmental issues, particularly his ideas of reducing the amount of recycled waste material to start with, and new ways to view garbage collection aside from municipally granted monopoly. Let's see if there's anything else. The municipal that's just his local stuff. So yeah, how's it going on that front, Antony?
Right. Well, I still collect, whenever I see anything relevant, I collect articles and bits of information, which I one day hope to be putting together in a short book called The Free Market Hippie, which is my idea for a book on free market environmentalism and libertarian approaches to saving the environment. In the meantime, if you go to my blog, seeingnotseen.blogspot.com, you can click on a tag that says environment or environmentalism or something like that, and there's a bunch of articles on libertarian and I've not blogged for quite a long time, but I will come back to it at some point. The truth is the book's on hold because there's other stuff I need to work on first.
I can recommend a book called Procrastination Annihilation, which might help you.
Yeah, I'm not procrastinating on it. I've just got some things that are of a higher priority. And to be honest, it would end up being quite a big project. So I'm doing smaller things first. Give me time to build up to it. This is, of course, in reference to an episode that I did when Tom wasn't available called, I think it's on YouTube under Only Capitalism Can Save the Planet, Socialism Will Destroy the Earth. But technology does make me quite hopeful because I've heard of things like these toilets which they're developing for the third world that don't need any piping, they don't need any water. They flash evaporate the urine and create these little packets of urea which can be used as fertilizer. They burn the poop and it creates enough energy to light an LED bulb and things like that. And imagine that this is the controversial, not for us, but for most people. Imagine the government had not provided municipal water, right? And said, gaining your own piped water is your own responsibility. Maybe these toilets would have been invented 50, 100 years ago because they're so much less labour intensive than putting pipes.
Yeah.
And maybe people would be harvesting rain off their roofs instead of, it's amazing what we don't have because the government does it, right? Everyone thinks without government, how would you have a flush toilet? We might have something a lot better than a flush toilet by now. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting when you say about harvesting the rainwater off your roof or harvesting rainwater. I don't know about in the States, but I know in the UK, if you harvest water, the water board will come and they'll want to charge you money for harvesting rainwater because the theory is you're taking water that would otherwise go into the water table and be shared amongst other people. So even if you catch rainwater in a rain barrel, they want to actually charge you money for catching your own water. I
think it's no surprise. I mean, similarly, if you produce your own electricity, you're obliged to sell it to the electric grid. That can only mean one thing. you're getting less than the market value of that energy.
Yeah.
They're not going to oblige you to sell it to the grid if they're paying you more than the market value. So that leads to a conclusion, which leads to the conclusion that without the government mandating that, a lot more people would have, say, solar energy. Why? Because they'd be able to sell it to someone.
Yeah.
So we don't know how much the progression of green technology has been held back by government. People think, oh, the government will subsidize green technology. That's not necessarily a good thing. I mean, if it's not commercially viable yet, the green subsidy makes it commercially viable and therefore removes the incentive to innovate. There's so many things that can be said on free market environmentalism. Recently I stumbled across a video on YouTube from about 10 years ago by, I was at the Mises Institute, Floy Lilly, The Economics of Recycling. Anyone who's interested in some controversial facts on recycling, that was a good one.
No, that's awesome. And it is illegal to collect rainwater in the United States.
Wow, that's crazy.
And well, yeah, it's crazy just to see how free market can help the poor people and in third countries and the environment as well. And one thing that I always think about is that Donor C app that Tom Woods had on his show, just it like an Uber style charitable app where you can donate to someone in a third world country, and you get to, they send you updates through the phone. You get to see exactly what they bought with the money. And I just love that because it brings the humanitarianism back into it. If you can make this personal connection with someone, you feel good, they feel good, they get something. I mean, beautiful, just beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and an interesting point on the rain harvesting thing, it's like, why do we filter all of the municipal water when a bunch of it's getting flushed down the loo? Should we not like get filtered water for drinking and like rainwater for flushing the toilet? Or something like that, could be.
Well,
it's just a waste of resources.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I really worry about, and one thing that isn't discussed in the United States, is our aging infrastructure, and it's the hidden infrastructure. And one thing that I've heard is that city water is absolutely contaminated with prescription drugs. If you take any sample of water, it has, anti-cholesterol pills and high blood pressure medication in the water. And
gay frogs, man. Gay frogs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
yeah, you should definitely go on Amazon and buy a water filter jug. It might not take everything out, but it'll take some stuff out. And if you're drinking government water, well, I would trust it.
Yeah, exactly. We use a Brita filter, so it gets some things,
likewise.
But we're about to move out of the city, and so I can't wait for that in a couple months here. But yeah, so just as we're closing up, because I got to run to class in about 12 minutes. But Anthony, you want to talk a little bit about Be Yourself and Love It?
Oh yeah, I've got another podcast in addition to the Scottish Liberty podcast called Be Yourself and Love It podcast. I definitely recommend it. It's all on personal development topics, just stuff that might interest you, and taking your life into your own hands, being a heroic libertarian, a Howard Rourke, or what's he called, Hank Rearden, Ayn Rand style, Dagny Taggart. I enjoy it. I sometimes interview personal development experts and vice versa. But the one thing, if you can get all links to our show and my show and other resources that I'm involved in by downloading my free book, Procrastination Annihilation, from beyourselfandloveit.com/do-it. It's a free ebook about 25,000 words long, only takes 2 hours to read, and it's very useful, and it's got links to all of my work and the stuff that we're involved in too. So you can find all of our links in there.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll include that in the show notes page as well. But Tom, are you involved with that at all?
No, not at all. That's Antony's side project. That's his solo project.
Right on.
My side project.
He's got more side projects than Phil and Selma.
Well, people will get that.
Sure. But the ones that do get it will.
Is there anything that you wanted to plug, Tom? Just anything you're involved with, or your involvement with the Scottish LP?
Well, if there's any viewers who know anybody in the UK, or they're in the UK or in Scotland, and they feel strongly about the Count Dankula thing, this coming Monday, as I say, he's due to be sentenced. I think it's 2:30. Don't quote me on that, but it's in the afternoon anyway, and we will be there to make our protest peacefully, of course. So get your ass to Airdrie Sheriff Court in Lanarkshire if you're in the UK and you hear this. And if you're in the UK again, if you're not a member of the Scottish Libertarian Party in Scotland, then why aren't you? Get yourself a membership and then support the party and come to the meetings that we have once a month. You can find us at www.scottishlibertarians.com.
Awesome. Yeah. So it's been a great pleasure to have you on. We got into a lot of really good topics, and I hope that we can pick it up again sometime in the near future just to shoot the shit a little more. But thank you guys so much for joining me. And once again, for the audience, the show notes may be found at libertyweekly.net/70. So thanks, guys.
Thank you
so much.
Have a good day.
Have a great day.